Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to Jay versus Horror, guys. Today we're going to talk about the Italian giallos. Now, when I first started watching these movies, I didn't even know how to pronounce that. I thought it was called giallos for years, for like 10 years, probably into my mid to late 20s. I thought that's what it was called because there just wasn't anybody around where I lived that even talked about these movies but me. So I just knew I saw it. I didn't even know the pronunciations. So, a little history, a little background on the Italian Giallo. Now, these movies started out, or where the name came from, I should say, is that back in the old days, they had these really cheap little novels. They were crime thrillers, they were sleazy, and they were so cheap that the paper they were printed on would often turn yellow. And that's where they came up with the term giallo, because giallo is the Italian word for yellow. Yes, and then after that, you go a little bit further, and then they even started making all the covers for these books yellow because it became culturally accepted that if you saw the yellow cover of the book, you didn't even have to, maybe you saw the title, but you didn't know what it was about. As soon as you saw that cover, you knew that it was a giallo, a cheap, sleazy crime thriller. Now, everywhere had these. Okay, they had these everywhere. It wasn't just Italy. In America, we had what's called the dime store novel. In England, they had what's called the penny dreadful, and even in France, they had these little things called the fantastiques, which were similar stories. And so we go from there, and then the giallo makes this transition into film. They start making films out of these novels, right? And one of the first people to do this was, of course, the great Italian director Mario Bava. And so this is where the giallo starts to change a little bit because in 1968, Mario Bava makes a film called Blood and Black Lace, and it is iconic to the extreme, where it affects everything after that. Uh, Basically, it's a thriller with a killer dressed in black who has a sharp object who is attacking women, and this will be a common theme throughout all giallos after this. They kind of abandon in film, it's not really so much about the crime element. Now, there were some that were like Franco Nero films and stuff like that that were pretty close to being giallos, but they were really more like crime action films, almost gritty pulp fiction films. But I digress. The standard that is set in 1968 with Blood and Black Lace is what people now uh, imagine as giallo when they say the term, because like I said, it affected every film made in that genre after that because you had to have this certain imagery in these films for it to qualify. It was almost like checking things off the list. Uh, Killer dressed in black with black gloves, a shiny, sharp instrument meant to penetrate the flesh of a young co-ed or something. And so the only differences in these movies were the twist, who the killer was, and sometimes maybe who the victim pool was. It might be supermodels one week, it might be brides in Italian bride fashion the next week, whatever they were, whoever their victim pool was. And of course, they also tried to outdo each other with the kills in these, but effects budgets were very limited in these Italian films, and that's why I love them too, because they say that in necessity is the mother of invention. And of course, what that means is when you don't have a lot, you get creative, and sometimes it works out even better than it would if you had the money to just go buy what you needed, right? And that was the case with a lot of these films. A lot of these giallo films were made by directors who were simply making them because they wanted to. I mean, they would get a job to go make a movie, and during the daytime they would shoot the movie that they were getting paid to make, and at nighttime they would shoot their own movie. Jess Franco was notorious for this, and he's not Italian. He's a Spanish filmmaker, I believe, but he made a lot of these type films of women in prison films and stuff like that. And some of the other directors that nobody talks about, you guys should go out there and look up. I mean, everyone talks about Fulci and everyone talks about Argento. I would say Sergio Martino is definitely worth taking a look at, and even his older films, his war films and stuff, are all pretty good. And then another one would be, I mean, a lot of people know about Joe Giamatti, but he made a lot of sleazy films. Uh, they weren't all true giallo films. A lot of them were kind of like monster films, but they're pretty good. And of course, Michele Soavi, who, in my opinion, Michele Soavi was like the student. He learned from all these guys. At some point, Soavi worked with Bava, he worked with Argento, he worked with Fulci, he worked with all these guys, D'Amato, at some point in his career, either as an actor or as a AD or something. And then when he gets his turn to become a director, you see how he's taken everything from all these guys and learned how to make a great film with like Stage Fright or even Demons 3, Church, The Church. Yeah. So, yeah, that's just a little quick thing on it because really that's what happens. You get to 1968, Blood and Black Lace comes out, and then everyone starts competing to make that movie again. After that, all these guys are competing with each other, and they're really just trying to outdo each other with the twist, and a little bit with the visuals and a little bit with the music. That they were really going at. They were competitive when they were making these films. These directors and a lot of people, I guess I want to be, abstract here and pick some weird name out of a hat and tell you guys that's my favorite Giallo director, but I can't. My favorite Giallo director is Argento. I mean, he just made so many that are good, and a lot of the Giallos are purely sleazy. Like New York Ripper. Watch New York Ripper from Lucio Fulci, but it's intended to be that. That's what it's supposed to be. But the Argento films, they were sleazy too, but they shied away from that as much as the other ones did. Argento wanted to tell you a story. He wanted you to see what he wanted you to see, and he also wanted to give you a good twist at the end. And Fulci, as far as I love Lucio Fulci is one of my favorite filmmakers, but I love his monster movies. I love The Beyond and City of the Living Dead and Zombie 2. I love those. I think his Giallos, Don't Torture a Duckling, New York Ripper, there's a few other ones. They're not as masterful in my opinion. Don't Torture a Duckling is pretty good, but it gets a little weird too, where it doesn't all like gel together for me. But a really good one that Fulci made is called The Psychic. If you want to see a really good Fulci thriller, I'm not even sure if that one really qualifies as a giallo, but it's a good thriller. The Psychic from 1977. But yeah, so that's basically it, guys. And then after that, like I said, all these directors were just competing to keep up and try to outdo each other and make a little bit better film or get a little bit bigger budget so they could have a little more gore or. And what can I tell you about what the best ones are? Well, this is where these films are totally subjective. You have to go watch. You go dig up a list. Pick a few directors. Just Google Giallo and pick a few of the directors and go down the list and watch these Giallo films because I guarantee you that my favorites are not going to be your favorites, and your favorites probably won't be mine. Although I did, I got to go with the masses on a lot of these. I think 72 Bird with the Crystal Plumage from Argento. I mean, that's prime Argento. That's about as good as it gets. I know a lot of people will say Suspiria. Look, there's a growing argument out there that Suspiria never was and is not a Giallo film whatsoever. It's more of a paranormal thriller than a Giallo film. And a lot of people make that argument for Phenomena too. But definitely Inferno. Those movies, the Three Mothers movies, are not Giallo movies. They're different. But anyway, and then a lot of people will tell you Deep Red is the best. A lot of people are just going to go with Blood and Black Lace. But, really, I think if the dark horse pick that I hear out there the most is Torso from Sergio Martino. If you ever get a chance to check that one out, great. Almost feels like just a straight up slasher, even though like, okay, so here we'll talk about that. Now, what is the difference between a slasher and a giallo? Well, we have to go back to, they all come from the same elements. Okay. You have to go back to like Agatha Christie with this stuff. And then there were none, right? These great mystery thriller novels that she wrote were in the novel, people are just getting picked off one by one, like a slasher movie, and somebody's trying to figure out what's going on. Right. So that kind of evolved into these cheaper versions of that were giallo books. And then, of course, those were translated into the films. Now, slashers, they just have a different cultural background, really. I mean, they came from America. That's where they grew. That's where that plant grew. And as far as, a lot of people will tell you that giallos influenced slashers. Of course they did. But, they want to go back to Bay of Blood, specifically a Mario Bava film. And there's a scene in there that makes people feel like that is the origin of the slasher. But I've heard of just things even before that, guys, like Peeping Tom and other stuff. I mean, you could even argue to some degree that Psycho is a slasher film that inspired Bava, because Bava's like slasher type giallo films did not come out until after Psycho, right? But anyway, so yeah, that's a brief history on it. I love talking about these films. We can talk about them anytime you want to. I really like it when people hit me with ones I haven't seen before because these are like an addiction for me. I dig them up all the time, and I've been doing this for I'd say probably 2010 is when I really started like not watching the popular ones. Like I'm gonna start trying to dig up the ones out of the past that nobody's seen. And I can tell you this, guys, when it comes to Giallos, there's a never ending supply. And it's kind of like found footage movies. You may only really love one out of every three or four. But when you do, it's totally worth watching every single one you've ever seen just because of that one. It's so good, right? Guys, that's all we got for this time now. We're doing movie club over at J versus Horror on Facebook. I put the link in the description below if you want to join us. Our movie this week is The Destroyer with Lyle Alzado and Anthony Perkins. It's a 1988 slasher film. It's like right there at the back end of the 80s slasher era, so it's really weird. It's not like the straight up summer camp ones at the beginning of the era. Um, but it's a fun movie. It's on Tubi for free. Check it out and come join us at J versus Horror on Facebook. 25,000 members, guys. Come join us. And as always, we will talk to you the next time we got something worth talking about. Bye, guys.